Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, December 17th here. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And Jill solicits your opinions about your social media pet peeves.
Yes, I posted one of my social media pet peeves, Moshe. And I thought, while I'm at it, I wonder what everybody else's are. And I got answers that made me laugh out loud and also second guess maybe some of my own posting.
All right. So first of all, what was your pet peeve that you posted that set this whole thing up?
So I have multiple social media pet peeves, Moshe, but the catalyst for my post was that randomly some girl popped up and she was kind of like putting on her makeup while she was explaining something. Mm-hmm. And it was such in-depth makeup with contouring and this and that. And it just kind of drove me nuts. Because
should I be doing that on the Mo News account?
No, okay. Please don't. Okay. So I just said no more makeup, putting on your makeup, and people
unless you're talking about makeup, right? Like unless
correct,
you're actually
unless it's
makeup.
A makeup tutorial or like a skincare tutorial. And then I said, while we're at it, another one of my pet peeves is when people start with, I don't know who needs to hear this, but, because it's like, you know exactly who needs to hear this.
Why are you posting it?
And the first rule of anything in life and in content creation is know your audience. You should know exactly who you're talking to. Yeah. So I tend to think that the people who post that just do it because they like the way it sounds, that they know who their audience.
So that's you. What did the community come back at you with?
All right, all of the fake videos and the fake family quote unquote games popping on for a minute. I guess, is that a new one that people say?
It's an expression. I'm popping on for a minute. Yeah.
When people write, because everyone is asking when it's clearly not the case, likely.
Everyone's asking where I got my outfit. And by that, I mean one person.
Oversharing. This ain't your AIM profile circa 2005.
I don't know. I disagree with that. I think oversharing is what Instagram and TikTok are about these days.
Yes. And I think the theme that I saw in a lot of the responses was just people want authenticity. And I think that people are able to tell when a content creator is not being honest about their life and everything seems like a little too perfect or too staged. It seems like that's the general theme.
That totally makes sense. People want it raw, unfiltered, and honest. And that's actually been part of the rejection I've heard from Gen Zers and Alpha generation about millennial culture, that millennials as sort of the social media natives began the idea of like, everything has to be perfect on your social media feed. Whereas the younger crew, starting in the, born in the late 90s, early 2000s, is all about keeping it real, Jill.
So somebody said if Moshe starts brushing his teeth while he does like the background explainers on stories, I'm out.
First of all, I think that would make it really hard for me to talk while I brush my teeth. At the same time, if Quip or Sonicare or Philips wants to come at me with a sponsorship, stay tuned, everyone.
It's going to get interesting.
Yeah. Hey, listen, sometimes you have those, important conversations with your partner when you're brushing your teeth at night. You're like, what did you just say? Anyway, we have a lot of news to get to, I know.
We do, Moshe. So let's get to the headlines here. Our top story, yet another school shooting in America. What we know about the shooting in Madison, Wisconsin. On Capitol Hill, RFK Jr. talking to senators to drum up support ahead of his confirmation hearings to run the health department, a peek into what type of questions he's likely to face. Overseas, ousted Syrian President Bashar Al-Assad makes his first statement since his government was overthrown. And a viral CNN report showing a Syrian freed from prison may have actually been a setup. In Canada, the deputy prime minister has resigned, and it looks like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is on the brink of collapse.
And it comes as the German chancellor has gone down, losing a confidence vote there. A lot of you remarking, what is happening around the world right now with leaders? We'll talk about it.
Next, Donald Trump and Softbank CEO announced $100 billion investment in the U.S., specifically focused on AI. Or is it $200 billion, as Trump pressed him on? I don't think he had a feeling that was coming.
Watch the negotiation happen live.
Exactly. Nothing like putting him on the spot there. And a Senate investigation finds that Amazon has been manipulating its workplace injury data. And finally, in a heartwarming story, Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson fulfills a lifelong dream by making her debut on Broadway, if you could believe it. We'll explain.
A one-night performance there for Justice Jackson.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
We'll tell you about a show that is still on the air where the actors have not aged a day.
Our top story is school shooting in Madison, Wisconsin yesterday, where a student killed 2 other people and injured 6 before taking her own life. 2 people killed have been identified as a teacher and a teenage student. Authorities have not identified the student who shot them and then shot herself and are still looking into a motive. But the AP and CNN reported late Monday that the shooter was, in fact, a 17-year-old female student. And Moshe, that in and of itself is very notable because nearly all school shooters in the past have been male.
Right. Jill, if you look at analyses of school shooters going back 40 years here, and 95% have been male, literally only a handful in the last 40 years have been female. So that in and of itself will make the investigation all the more important here to get to the bottom of the motive and what happened here at this Christian school in central Wisconsin.
Now, of the 6 people injured, police say 2 are in critical condition. The 4 others have non-life-threatening injuries. Police were dispatched to Abundant Life Christian School in Madison on Monday morning just before 11 a.m. Central Time. They arrived to find the shooter already dead. The Madison police chief called it a sad, sad day for the community. Here's more of what he had to say from a midday press conference yesterday.
Usually this is where I start and I say thank you for coming and talk about how important the media is to our community. But the truth is today is a sad, sad day, not only for Madison, but for our entire country, where yet another police chief is doing a press conference to speak about violence in our community, specifically in one of the places that's most sacred to me as someone who loves education and to someone who has children that are in schools. We train on this almost quarterly. The last time we trained on this as commanders was approximately 2 weeks ago. The protocols are simple. Stop the killing, stop the dying, find out who's doing this. And the officers did that, and they did that adamantly. We had officers from around the county and around the state that came in support of this particular incident. Officers located a juvenile who they believe was responsible for this deceased in the building. Additionally, the officers began administering life-saving efforts to anyone who was wounded and making sure that those persons were transported.
Abundant Life Christian School is a small private K-12 school tucked into a residential neighborhood in Madison. The school posted on Facebook asking for people's prayers as they collect more information.
Yeah, and we're so sad, Jill, you go to the school Facebook page and the previous post is all about like, here are the exciting lunch options we have in the cafeteria this week going into Christmas break. And then the next post, that was posted on Monday, is there's been a school shooting. We need your prayers. At first, there was some confusion around the death toll here. Police had thought there were 5 killed, then changed the number. It turns out, again, 2 people were killed, and the shooter took her own life. The Madison police, they're still trying to get a sense of things, but a couple of those victims still in a very serious / critical condition at a hospital as of late Monday night. You mentioned we don't know much about the shooter besides she was a she, so we're waiting on more details there. The Madison police chief has been very outspoken. I thought gave a pretty compelling press conferences as I watched them on Monday. He said that his officers had been trained for a school shooting as recently as 2 weeks ago, that unfortunately is part of the job now. There are regular drills that they run when it comes to school shootings. They didn't have to fire any weapons when they entered the building, finding the victims, trying to offer them support, and then finding the shooter. Who was already dead at that point. Shock and grief reverberated across Wisconsin as the news of the shooting spread. Police had to clear a 28-acre campus there. It includes a preschool and a church, and then city buses took students to a nearby clinic, serving as a reunification point. Some of the students waving at the media as they drive by. It's just far too normal for this generation of kids. The police chief also saying he was dismayed that this happened so close to Christmas. Here's a bit more of what he said on Monday afternoon.
Every child, every person in that building is a victim and will be a victim forever. And these types of trauma don't just go away. And we need to figure out and try to piece together what exactly happened. Right now, my heart is heavy for my community. My heart is heavy for Madison, and we have to come together as a community and figure out what happened here and make sure that it doesn't happen in any other place that should be a refuge for students in our community.
Jill, I think it's an important point. You know, there's the killed, there's the wounded, but then there's everyone else who experienced that and the trauma they're going to have to live with for the rest of their life.
Moshe, if you could believe it, it was just a few days ago that we marked the 12th anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting.
I can believe it. It still shocked the country at that point. And now, unfortunately, there's far too many of these, and they all sort of run together here. According to CNN, there have now been 82 school shootings this year that actually is equal to the number from last year. There were 82 school shootings in 2023, and we're still not quite done with 2024 here. In a statement yesterday, the president called the shooting shocking and unconscionable. He said, we need Congress to act now, referring to gun reform legislation. And we should mention, you know, during the Biden term here was the first time that there was actually legislation that was passed related to gun reform. Some subtle changes to the law there a couple of years ago, but still when it comes to some of the larger things folks are looking for as far as background checks, et cetera, that cannot be passed on a federal level, though we have seen attempts in various states to do more.
All right, now over to Capitol Hill, where Robert F. Kennedy Jr. began meeting with senators yesterday as he works to shore up support for his nomination to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Kennedy's set to meet with more than 24 senators and staff throughout the week. He'll likely face some tough questions about his views on vaccine and his past support for abortion access. He is facing critics from the left and the right on vaccines. RFK Jr. has said the COVID-19 shot was the, quote, deadliest vaccine ever made, and has questioned if the polio vaccine caused more deaths than it prevented. We should mention Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell is a survivor of polio. He has spoken out to say that efforts to undermine public confidence in proven disease cures are, quote, dangerous. President-elect Trump was asked Monday if he supported taking the polio vaccine out of circulation. He said that is not going to happen and mentioned that he has friends that were affected by polio. However, Trump did echo some of Kennedy's skepticism about vaccine mandates. Here's what he said about it at a press conference in Mar-a-Lago yesterday.
What about the polio vaccine?
Well, I'm a big believer in it, and I think everything should be looked at, but I'm a big believer in the polio vaccine, the Salk vaccine.
Do you think schools should mandate vaccines?
I don't like mandates. I'm not a big mandate person. So, you know, I was against mandates. Mostly Democrat governors did the mandates, and they did a very poor thing. It was, you know, in retrospect, they made a big mistake.
During the press conference, Trump also tried to downplay fears that Kennedy would make radical changes if confirmed to lead the health department. He called him a rational guy.
Trump has tried to basically pick and choose here when it comes to Kennedy, saying they disagree on some things, they agree on some things. He's bringing him in to shake things up. Remember, Kennedy, until not so long ago, was a Democrat. So they have a variety of differences of opinion when it comes to the environment and climate change and et cetera. But they both approach sort of the health establishment with a similar amount of skepticism. Now, Trump has said he wants Kennedy to bring him the data and has tried to basically downplay extreme moves that people think Kennedy is going to make. And Kennedy has said that he would make. Trump has said the approach here, the pick, was all about Kennedy's ambition to make America healthy again, MAHA, M-A-H-A. But RFK here way more skeptical than Trump about the FDA, the CDC, the pharmaceutical companies. And remember, Trump was the guy who oversaw the Warp Speed project to create the COVID vaccine. And he saw as his political base came out against it, and sort of Trump has slowly shifted after wanting to actually call the COVID vaccine the Trump vaccine, if you recall that, about 4 years ago. So what's interesting here is that Trump has already tried to soften Kennedy's position on regulatory agencies needing certain reforms. They had a meeting with the heads of the pharmaceutical companies. These are companies that Kennedy has very rare positive words to say about, but Trump is trying to bring him on board. He had Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz, who's the choice to be the head of CMS, as well as pharma executives talking about drug costs. So here the idea is to work with the pharmaceutical companies. The president-elect saying yesterday that they would target the middleman. Remember, we've talked about this before on the podcast and on Instagram, that our drug prices, you have the drug manufacturers, You have the wholesalers, you have the pharmacy benefit managers, you have the pharmacies, you have the insurance companies, you have a lot of how our drugs get priced, developed, etc. There's a lot of various groups working in there. And in particular, Trump wants to take aim at the pharmacy benefit managers who negotiate drug prices for insurers and employers. What is notable is among the folks around Kennedy right now, he has an attorney named Aaron Siri, who it turns out, according to the New York Times, filed a petition with the FDA just 2 years ago to revoke the approval for the polio vaccine. Back to the polio vaccine here. It wasn't at the direction of RFK. Nonetheless, RFK is very close to him. He's an ally of RFK, and he's somebody that RFK wants to bring into an administration. And so those are among the concerns people have of not just RFK, not just Trump, but who are the people who Kennedy will be bringing in here? What are their opinions? And while Kennedy says he's not anti-vaccine, but anti-vaccine mandate and wants more research and numbers around it, who else will he bring in? And what are their opinions on all of this? And a reminder, when you lift a mandate, you lose the incentive for certain people to get the vaccine, thereby allowing for the spread of those illnesses again, which we've seen with measles and other things. So that has led to skepticism on the left as well as on the right. You mentioned Mitch McConnell. There are some others, doctors in the U.S. Senate, who have more questions for Kennedy on all of this. And then on the right, Kennedy's also facing issues on abortion, which will be part of his purview as HHS secretary, overseeing the FDA, the CDC, various abortion drugs. So you have social conservatives, like the Mike Pence types of the world, who are pushing their former colleagues on Capitol Hill to vote down Kennedy, saying, you know, this guy's really a liberal, especially on issues like abortion. You don't want him there either, because he will touch some of those issues as HHS secretary. So Kennedy here has to effectively win 50 votes in the Senate with a tiebreaker from J.D. Vance, which means he can only lose 3 senators. If he loses 4, he loses his nomination there. So they have to make sure they got things locked up. So he's got a lot of meetings to have in the coming weeks.
All right, time for the speed read from CNN. Ousted Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad appeared to make his first public statement yesterday after his family's 50-year regime was overthrown by opposition rebels more than a week ago. Assad posted the statement from Moscow yesterday on the Syrian presidency's Telegram account. The statement claims that he did not back down in the face of terrorist groups seeking to overthrow him and fought alongside officers and soldiers on the front line, quote, just meters from terrorists until the very end. Moshe, I don't recall seeing video of that. I don't know if you did in your travels on the internet.
I think most people would say, I don't remember the Syrian dictator like fighting off the rebels himself, surrounded by other fighters, as much as he wants to remember it that way. Jill, it's not even clear if he posted this, who has control of the Telegram account. There was word that it was deleted at some point too. That said, it sort of jives with something he might say. He sort of lived in a fantasy land, had illusions of his own grandeur. He says that, you know, he was going to oversee combat operations. The man has never battled anyone in his life. And it wasn't his choice. He was going to fight them off, but then people left around him. Jill, the only video we have in those final days around Damascus and those bases is Syrian soldiers taking off their uniforms, switching into civilian gear, and running away. Not even wanting to fight for this guy. And then he says that it was totally Russia that wanted him to leave Syria and come to Russia. Russia's like, no, you wanted to come to Russia here. Nonetheless, he appears to have no constituency. Everyone has turned on him. Nobody liked him by the end. Why? Well, his deadly dictatorship, people thought he might be better than his father, who murdered tens of thousands to keep power in the 80s. Well, Bashar takes over, and over the course of the past decade, 600,000 people are dead. They've stopped counting. 14 million Syrians have been displaced, tens of thousands imprisoned. The country has been destroyed for this guy to keep power here. And so just notable that we haven't heard from him in a while. And allegedly they put out the statement. Jill, he is a London-trained eye doctor. I don't know whether he has to turn to that at some point, but we do know the estimates are that based on the drug trade that his family was involved in, and when we're talking about drugs, we're talking about illegal drugs, that his estimated worth, if they can access their funds, is anywhere from $1 to $12 billion with a B. There was some good Wall Street Journal reporting on that over the weekend.
We've also been reporting on the aftermath of Assad's ousting. Last week, thousands of Syrians flooded the notoriously brutal Sednaya prison looking for family members who had been detained there for years. And the accounts were horrific, including reports of a crematorium that Assad's regime would use to get rid of bodies. However, there is one report that's getting some major pushback. CNN reporter Clarissa Ward, she was reporting from a secret facility in Syria when she captured on camera what she believed to be was a prisoner that was hidden and unaware that Assad had been ousted. It was a harrowing report. If you haven't seen it yet, it has gone viral. So Ward and her crew happened to find a prisoner that was left in one cell, or appeared to be, claiming that he had been locked away for more than 3 months and left to die. Take a listen to a bit of this report.
He tells the fighter he's from the city of Homs and has been in the cell for 3 months.
Okay, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
He clutches my arm tightly with both hands.
Okay.
Does anyone have any water?
In the video, she gets him water. She escorts him outside to eat. He kisses her and holds her hand when he reaches fresh air. Ward herself called it one of the most extraordinary moments that she'd ever witnessed. But now further investigation into the report reveals that Ward had been duped. The man she thought that she helped free from this government-run prison was actually a notorious member of Bashar al-Assad's forces, known to brutally torture and kill civilians. CNN had said they are now investigating themselves and denied any allegations that they fabricated the story, saying that the events transpired just as they were shown on film.
Yeah, if you haven't seen this report, it's worth Googling the Clarissa Ward CNN prisoner report just to check it out. She, by the way, is an award-winning journalist. I've worked alongside her. Consider her a friend. We've had her on the podcast from her reporting in Ukraine. And I think in this case, as they were going along there, they were told something that turned out not to be true by the rebels and the groups that were going around freeing prisoners. This guy purported to be an ordinary citizen, and it turns out that, as you mentioned, the fact checkers have found that he was actually a member of the Assad regime, who happened to be in jail there for less than a month due to a dispute with a higher ranking officer over money that they were extorting from somebody. And so Verify Psy is part of the Pointer fact-checking network, and they did the heavy lifting on this. So we appreciate them looking into this, because there was something that didn't smell right when we first watched this piece. It's one of the reasons we didn't put it up on the Instagram account, is something felt a little too perfect about it. He was hiding under this blanket as she walks in. They give him water. He's like praying to the sky that he can see light again. But if somebody didn't see light for that long, typically you can't look straight into the sun. But this guy was able to. Then he sits down to do an interview, and he would go from like being totally there to like totally shaking. And so questions were asked subsequently about it. It turns out this guy, Salama, participated in the killing and torture of civilians about 10 years ago. Jill, to her credit, Clarissa Ward is posting details about all of this and the new information on her Instagram account, on her Twitter account, saying that they've now confirmed this to CNN, that they were misled about who this guy was. And CNN says in their statement, no one other than the CNN team was aware of our plans to visit the prison that day. The events that transpired as they appear in our film, the decision to release the prisoner featured in our report was taken by the guard, a rebel. We reported the scene as it unfolded, including what the prisoner told us, with clear attribution. We have subsequently been investigating this ourselves. This is the CNN statement continued. We're aware that he may have given a false identity. We're continuing our reporting into this wider story. So that's where things are on that. Just unfortunately, there's so many important stories out there. And Clarissa and her team have done such incredible work around the world for a while here, but still important, especially as we've said this, like the rebels who have taken over Syria, they're an offshoot of Al-Qaeda with their own various issues. So I remember being asked, Jill, as all this was unfolding a weekend ago, who are the good guys here we're rooting for? Like, well, depends on how one defines good guy. But ultimately here, there's a lot of further questions to be asked about the new guys and how different they are from the old guys.
I guess time will tell, Moshe, and we'll see how it plays out. But to your point, this just is not good for the state of media, especially given how many people don't trust the media, particularly mainstream media. And I would want to point out, as you've said, you've worked with Clarissa Ward. She's one of the most respected international correspondents out there right now. She's
a mother, and she risks her life, in some of the most dangerous places on earth to tell these stories.
And I just want to say, as we talk about people who get their news from influencers and from talking heads, except that the difference here is that CNN is trying to take responsibility for this. They're being upfront about it. She's going to talk, as you're saying, she's going to talk about what mistakes were made and how this actually happened. And so they're holding themselves accountable for it because it is a horrible mistake.
And that's a major difference, I think, between some of these networks, not all of them, and some of the influencers who tend to not always be honest about things that they messed up or theories they put out there. So good on them for getting to the bottom of the story.
And Moshe, to your credit, you were the first person that I spoke to anyway who was like, something about this story does not feel right. You mentioned it on our editorial meeting. I hadn't seen the report yet. And then I watched it and I'm like, it is way too good to be true. Because I've been a field reporter for many years. And it's very rare that things unfold like that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, at the same time, I understand that, sometimes in war zones, you have those remarkable stories, and everything could have been on the level, but it turns out that there's more to the story here.
Okay, from CTV in Canada, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's chief lieutenant throughout his tenure as Canada's prime minister resigned from his cabinet on Monday. She cited differences over how to confront President-elect Trump's threatened tariffs and a possible trade war. The abrupt resignation of Chrystia Freeland, who served the past 4 years as both finance minister and deputy prime minister, is the latest blow to Trudeau, whose popularity has nosedived over the past year. If federal elections were held today, polls project a wipeout for Trudeau's Liberal Party. His cabinet, which was meeting in Ottawa soon after the letter was made public, seemed stunned by the development.
So up north in Canada, Trudeau has had some issues. Recent polling shows his Liberal Party behind the Conservative Party there by 20 points. He's been in charge for a while now and intended to run for re-election again next year. They have to have an election by October based on Canadian law. The one could be called early. So it remains to be seen if that'll happen, the way the parliamentary system works up there. Among the potential contestants here, though not clear if she would be able to be the next prime minister, Freeland is among them. There are other folks in Trudeau's cabinet who are also interested in the job. He again says he's going to vow to lead the Liberal Party here. This is sort of, Jill, roughly, if over the summer, as we watched what took place with Joe Biden, if he had multiple cabinet secretaries resign on him. And so this is sort of what we're seeing in Canada. And it comes at a time where it's not just Canada, right? In the U.S., you saw Republicans take over the Senate and the White House. In France, their government just fell. The prime minister is being replaced. In Germany yesterday, you had the chancellor lose a confidence vote in parliament. So that's a leadership crisis in Germany right now. They're going to be calling a spur of the moment election. It'll take place in February. Scholz in Germany was leading a minority government. He has a very unpopular three-party coalition that collapsed. And so he's had issues since the fall there. It effectively means that Europe's largest economy, Germany, will now be in the hands of a caretaker government for about 2 months. And so you got Canada, you got France, you got Germany. We've been telling you about South Korea, where the unpopular prime minister there declared martial law for a hot second, literally a few seconds, and has now been impeached. In Japan, the incumbents went down. In India, the incumbents lost a bunch of votes. So what's going on? Well, the Financial Times has done an interesting analysis and found that basically in all major democracies around the world, the people want out whoever is in charge. What's been going on? Inflation, global phenomenon, as we've been telling you about. There's the various global crises around the world. The energy crisis related to Russia and Ukraine has hit some other countries even much harder than our country. And then add to that just mass migration around the world. That's been a major issue in a number of these countries. And so you see things coming to a head here. The Biden-Harris team losing in the fall was the 10th major government to or 10th major incumbent to lose this year. You know, I got the situation in Germany, in France, in Canada, all in the past couple of weeks here. This major anti-incumbency wave. And in some cases, these are more liberal governments. In some cases, these are more conservative governments. The thing is, the people have just had it. People are frustrated. And you're seeing this as sort of an outgrowth of COVID and the aftermath, especially economically. And again, when it comes to migration happening now globally, though the issues are different in all of these countries.
From the Associated Press, the Japanese investment firm behind WeWork and Yahoo has announced that it's investing $100 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. The CEO of Softbank, Masayoshi Son, made the announcement alongside President-elect Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort Monday. He said the investment will create at least 100,000 jobs focused on AI and related infrastructure, including energy, data centers, and chips. Trump called it a demonstration of optimism in America's future. And Son said that his confidence in the U.S. economy has tremendously increased with Trump's victory.
We should mention Masa Son is the 50th or so richest man in the world. The investor has roughly about 30 billion cash on hand right now, but that's more than enough to be able to raise 100 billion. But is it 100 billion, Jill? Because during the event yesterday, live in front of the media, Trump's like, so I have a question for you. Can you make it 200 billion? And Son laughs and he goes, I'll try to make it happen. Clearly jokingly, Trump then takes him at his word and says, okay, cool, 200 billion it is. Son then said, great, you're a great negotiator. Trump then said, Son, you're a good man. I still think based on that back and forth, it's probably 100 billion. But we'll see what happens. You can watch the clip over on our Instagram account. SoftBank pledged 50 billion and 50,000 jobs back in December of 2016 at the beginning of Trump's first term. It's been reported that they've invested up to 75 billion since that 50 billion investment. So we'll watch that. But this has been a big thing for Trump. We mentioned in our coverage in the past few days that Trump has also made the promise that anybody or any company willing to invest $1 billion in America or more will get various environmental regulations lifted in order to get their projects done. So this is a big thing here for Trump, and we'll monitor to see what Masa Son and SoftBank have in store.
And if you're wondering where you've heard his name before, if you followed the WeWork saga, he was the big investor behind Adam Neumann there.
Yes, Adam Neumann would go to Masa Son over and over again for more and more money.
And he gave it to him,
and
which is part of the problem.
Well, but also the reason why he's so rich is he's also been a very smart investor over time as well. WeWork, or at least the amount of money he gave WeWork, turns out to be one time where he went awry.
From the Washington Post, a Senate report is accusing Amazon of manipulating data about workplace injuries to make its warehouses seem safer and ignoring internal recommendations to improve conditions. The investigation by the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions accuses Amazon of knowing for years that its fixation on meeting production quotas is directly linked to higher injury rates. The committee is led by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who has been a major critic of Amazon. The 160-page report was based on an 18-month investigation by the committee. It revealed that Amazon warehouses reported injury rates 30% higher than the 2023 industry average. We should note Amazon is disputing the data, saying that its teams found flaws in their own internal research on injuries, and that's why executives rejected recommendations based on those findings.
One internal study found that the workers should limit repetitive motions, like picking things off of shelving units, to about 216 motions an hour to avoid injuries. Amazon workers, apparently, because of productivity quotas, were doing 266 of the same motion an hour. That's 50 more than recommended, leading to some of these work injuries here. Another study showed that faster work speeds were directly tied to more injuries, not surprisingly. Amazon didn't make any changes as a result of these findings, according to this report. The U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York is investigating these accusations that, again, Amazon intentionally underreported injuries at its warehouses. In June, California fined Amazon about $6 million for violating a new law aimed at protecting workers.
And a fun one to close the podcast Tuesday from CBS News. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson fulfilled a lifelong dream on Saturday night on Broadway. The justice made her debut in the musical comedy And Juliet, which she describes as a story about female empowerment and women's abilities to control their own destiny. In her memoir, Justice Brown Jackson discussed her love of theater. She was a self-described theater kid and even took a drama class at Harvard. where one of her fellow classmates was Matt Damon. And Moshe, they apparently were scene partners at one point.
Jill, not only that, so in that scene, apparently, this is how Jackson remembers this. I have to look to see how Damon's replied to this. She says that they were performing a scene from Waiting for Godot. This is them. They're the same age. They're both 54 years old. They're at Harvard 30 plus years ago. She says he's probably not going to remember this, but the reason why I remember this is because he was already kind of well known around campus and off campus. So she was very excited to be in a scene with him. And apparently the scene went very well for her. At the end, Ketanji remembers the following, that the professor said, "Ketanji, you were very good. Matt, we'll talk."
What do professors know, right?
Harvard acting professors, Matt. Maybe they had a very good conversation, and that's what led Matt Damon to be Matt Damon. Anyway, fun little fact for you at the Christmas table next week.
I guess the tough love did the trick. Meanwhile, back to the Justice. Ahead of her moment in the spotlight, she took part in many rehearsals for the show, including table reads, and she had to take vocal lessons.
Yeah, so she made her one and only appearance Saturday night. She sat down with CBS News before the show and told them that she felt in her element during rehearsals. She said that she wants to show people that justices are real people too, encourage everyone to fulfill their destiny. I posted the CBS clip over on our Instagram account yesterday. You get a lot of clips from her in the show and see her performance. It's, very interesting, Jill. You don't think of a Supreme Court justice wanting to act on Broadway. At the same time, they all have interesting hobbies. Some of them, I think Clarence Thomas and others are hunting a lot. So she decided not to go hunting or go on, or take up another hobby. She decided to go learn some lines and perform in a Broadway show over the weekend.
I don't know if it makes her more relatable, given that that's like a completely unrealistic thing, but I think it's cool.
Hasn't acted on Broadway.
Like justices, they're just like us. I don't know if I would go that far, but I do think it's cool.
She's a theater geek, right? Like if you're into musical theater, maybe that's how she's more relatable as opposed to having the opportunity to star in a Broadway show of your choosing one weekend. All right, we end here with On This Day in History. We go back to the year 497 BCE. Happy Saturnalia. It was the holiday the Roman Empire held to celebrate Saturn, the deity of Saturn. Remember, they had all the various Roman gods in the sky. Actually coincides with the beginning of Capricorn as the Romans prayed to their various gods. It was the midwinter festival for the Roman Empire. It was actually, it would become a 7-day festival. Among the traditions, greenery, feasting, and gift giving. Notably, as Christianity would become more popular, the Roman Empire would accept Christianity. They would, since nobody really knows what day of the year Jesus was born, they decided to make it December 25th, which notably is the last day of Saturnalia. And so as they were trying to replace various Roman holidays with Christian holidays, the thought is that's one of the reasons why December 25th became a Christmas Day. All right, on this day in 1892, the first issue of Vogue magazine was published. And on this day in 1903, you might hear some crying in the background. It's bedtime here in the One Who Knew household. Near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, on this day in 1903, a duo named Orville and Wilbur made their first successful flight in history. It lasted 12 seconds, covered 120 feet. It was a gasoline-powered, propeller-driven biplane. A duo named Orville and Wilbur Wright make their first successful flight in history of a self-propelled, heavier-than-air aircraft. They'd already been working on various planes. This was a big deal, though. This flight would last 12 seconds, cover 120 feet. By 1905, they could get their plane to remain up for 39 minutes at a time, from 12 seconds to 39 minutes there in just a couple of years. By 1908, they traveled to France, making their first public flights over there. The historic aircraft from this day in history is still on permanent display over at the Air and Space Museum in D.C. Recommend all of you, if you get to D.C., there's a lot to see, but I always love the Air and Space Museum. And we end here with a bit of pop culture on this day in history. In 1989, the answer to your clue, they're a TV showcast now in their 36th season who have not aged a day. The Simpsons made its debut on this day in 1989, now in season 36. Homer, Marge, Bart, and Lisa already began to attract big name stars. By season 3, Michael Jackson, Sting, Aerosmith all already wanted to appear in The Simpsons. And so it really took off there in the early 90s and still going strong.
Moshe, that's like a clue/riddle that you gave us.
Which show is still on TV and they haven't aged a day. Always go for stuff like that. Always go to animation.
Now you tell me. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
Happy Saturnalia, everybody. Especially to my Capricorn, who I'm married to, Alex. Capricorn season is on, everybody.
All right. Bye, everyone.